I still remember the morning it all began, because it felt like the start of a new chapter in my career. And before I go on, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because you're going to want to follow this journey until the very end. I had been working at a mid-sized tech company in Chicago for almost 6 years. I started as a junior analyst, slowly climbing my way up. Now, for the first time, there was an opening for senior manager. It was the kind of promotion that came with not just a pay bump but also real influence, control over projects, budgets, and a team of my own. But I wasn't the only one with eyes on it. There was Karen, who had a reputation for charming executives but letting her team do all the heavy lifting. And then there was Mark, the quiet type, who smiled a lot but always seemed to be pulling strings behind the scenes. From the very moment the promotion was announced, I could feel something shift. The competition wasn't just professional anymore, it was personal. And as I would soon find out, some people were willing to cross lines I didn't even know existed. What I didn't realize then was that my name was already being dragged into something that hadn't even happened yet. At first, I thought the competition would stay clean. We would all prepare our presentations, make our case to upper management, and the best candidate would win. But by the second week, I noticed strange things happening. My manager pulled me aside and asked why I had missed a deadline on a financial report. I was confused. I had finished it early and even double-checked the numbers. When I went back to my files, the report was gone. Not just missing, but deleted from the shared drive under my username. It didn't stop there. During a project update call, Karen casually mentioned that someone had sent the wrong version of a client proposal. That someone turned out to be me, except I had never even touched that file. My name, my account, my digital fingerprints were all over mistakes I hadn't made. I started to realize this wasn't random. Someone was setting me up to look careless, maybe even incompetent. If management believed it, my shot at the promotion would vanish before I even got a chance to prove myself. The worst part? Nobody seemed surprised. It was as if my downfall had been predicted, maybe even expected. And that's when I knew, someone inside the office was actively working against me. But I had no idea how far they were willing to go next. A few days later, things escalated from frustrating to downright alarming. My director called me into his office and slid a printed email across the desk. "Care to explain this?" he asked. The email was supposedly from me to a vendor, complaining about incompetent management and hinting that I was considering leaving the company if I didn't get the promotion. My stomach dropped. The email was signed with my name, sent from my work address, and even had my usual signature line. But I had never written it. I tried to explain it had to be fake, maybe even fabricated, but the doubt was already in his eyes. "If this is your way of negotiating leverage," he said, "it's a very poor strategy." I walked out of that meeting with my head spinning. Someone wasn't just deleting files or sending the wrong drafts. They were actively impersonating me, creating a paper trail that painted me as disloyal and reckless. That evening, I stayed late in the office, combing through my email history. And then I noticed something chilling. Certain emails had been accessed from my account at times I wasn't even logged in. Badge records showed I had already left the building. Whoever was doing this had access not just to my work but to my identity inside the company systems. And that meant the circle of suspects had just narrowed in a very dangerous way. The following Monday, our team gathered in the big glass conference room for the weekly status meeting. Normally, these were routine, project updates, timelines, a little small talk. But that day, it felt different. People avoided eye contact with me. A couple of coworkers whispered in the corner, then quickly stopped when I walked by. Halfway through the meeting, the director paused and said, "We need to address performance concerns." My chest tightened. He turned to me and asked why I had been careless with client communications. Then, to my shock, he pulled up the fake vendor email on the big screen in front of everyone. The silence was suffocating. Karen leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, clearly enjoying the show. Mark just scribbled something in his notebook without looking up. I tried to defend myself, explaining the email wasn't mine, but the room felt heavy with skepticism. The director ended the meeting abruptly, saying, "We'll be reviewing this further." No eye contact, no reassurance, just a dismissal. As people filed out, Karen brushed past me and whispered, "Some of us just aren't cut out for leadership." It was subtle enough that no one else heard, but sharp enough to cut deep. That was the moment I realized, this wasn't about competition anymore. This was war. And the very next morning, the first open strike hit me where it hurt the most. The next morning started like any other. I grabbed a coffee in the break room, trying to shake off the weight of yesterday's humiliation. But the chatter around me told a different story. 2 colleagues lowered their voices when I walked in. Another avoided my eyes completely. And then I caught a phrase that made my blood run cold: "He only wants the promotion for the paycheck. He's already planning to leave." It spread faster than wildfire, rumors that I was disloyal, using the company as a stepping stone, and ready to abandon ship if I didn't get what I wanted. None of it was true, but in an office environment, perception can be more powerful than fact. By lunchtime, even my closest coworker asked quietly, "Are you really thinking of quitting?" That's when I knew the sabotage had moved beyond emails and files. Someone was poisoning my reputation directly, using whispers and half-truths to erode every ounce of trust I had built. I kept a straight face, but inside I was boiling. They wanted me isolated, doubted, weakened. And for the first time, I started wondering if I should fight back in a way they didn't expect. Because the next move, I realized, had to be mine. Up until then, the attacks had been hidden: deleted files, fake emails, whispered rumors. But the next strike happened in plain view. We were preparing for a client presentation, the kind that could decide whether our team landed a contract worth millions of dollars. I had spent weeks polishing the numbers, rehearsing the pitch, making sure every detail lined up. When the day came, I plugged in my laptop, opened the slide deck, and froze. The charts were scrambled, data points reversed, and key slides were missing altogether. My boss's face tightened, and the client looked unimpressed before I even said a word. My heart pounded as I scrambled to explain, stalling while trying to pull up backups. It was a nightmare, and it was happening right there, in front of everyone. I managed to salvage enough to get through the meeting, but the damage was obvious. Later, I discovered the file had been tampered with less than an hour before the meeting, again, under my login. Whoever was doing this had real-time access, and they weren't afraid to humiliate me openly now. That was when I stopped doubting myself. This wasn't paranoia. Someone had declared all-out war, and unless I found proof soon, my career would be over before the promotion decision was even made. What happened next cracked the whole situation wide open. That night, I stayed in the office long after everyone else left. My hands shook as I scrolled through access logs, badge scans, and system reports. I needed evidence, something undeniable. Hours passed with nothing but dead ends. Then I spotted it. A series of logins from my account that happened while my badge showed me leaving the building. At first, I assumed it was just another hack. But then I noticed the terminal ID the machine used was inside the office, only a few desks away from mine. I crept down the hallway, the office eerily quiet. When I reached the row of cubicles, my eyes locked on the faint glow of a monitor. Mark's desk. The screen was still open. And there it was, my account, logged in, files pulled up, emails queued as drafts. My pulse raced. It wasn't some faceless hacker, it was someone I sat across from every day. Mark, the same guy who smiled at me in meetings, the same guy who never raised his voice, was behind the entire campaign. I wanted to confront him right there, but I froze. If I accused him without proof, it would be my word against his. I needed a plan. And first, I needed to make sure he didn't know I had seen him. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. But inside, I was already preparing for war. The next day, I quietly scheduled a meeting with Human Resources. I knew I needed someone on my side who could take complaints seriously, and HR was the only channel I hadn't yet used. I brought logs, screenshots, and timestamps, carefully laying out the evidence without letting my emotions take over. The HR manager frowned as she flipped through the documents. "This is unusual," she said. "If true, this could be considered serious misconduct. But we'll need to investigate thoroughly." I nodded, trying to keep calm. Meanwhile, word had somehow reached Karen. She approached my desk with a fake smile, asking if I was okay. Her tone implied I was unstable or paranoid. I kept quiet. She had no idea I was already building a case. Over the next few days, HR discreetly monitored all accounts and systems. Badge scans, server logs, and Slack threads were cross-referenced. Every suspicious login was recorded, every email traced. And slowly, the pattern became impossible to ignore. By the end of the week, HR called me in again. "We have something," the manager said. "It's clear someone has been impersonating you in the system. We're scheduling a formal meeting with all parties." Finally, it looked like the truth might come out. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the most dangerous part of this game was still ahead. After the HR meeting, I knew I couldn't wait for the formal investigation to finish. Mark was clever, careful, and if given time, he might cover his tracks completely. I needed a strategy that would both protect me and expose him once and for all. I started by documenting everything meticulously: timestamps, emails, badge scans, and Slack activity. I even recreated the timeline of deleted files and fake messages. My goal was to have a narrative so airtight that no one could twist it. Next, I subtly tested his behavior. I sent a decoy email from my account, a harmless message about a mock project, and watched. Within minutes, Mark was logged in again, attempting to edit it. Every move he made was now traceable. Then came the hardest part: patience. I couldn't confront him yet. If I acted too early, he might retaliate or claim ignorance. So I kept performing at work, kept smiling in meetings, and let the suspicion around me simmer just enough to make him overconfident. By the end of the week, I felt ready. The evidence was solid, the witnesses were quietly aligned, and HR was already on alert. I knew the moment to strike would need precision, timing, and control. And I had just the plan to corner him where he least expected it. The morning of the showdown, I felt a strange mix of nerves and determination. HR had arranged a private meeting with Mark, me, and the HR manager. The room was sterile, quiet, and every glance felt loaded with tension. Mark walked in, smiling as if nothing had happened. I could see the faint trace of confidence, the kind that comes from believing you're untouchable. I, on the other hand, carried a folder thick with evidence: screenshots, logs, timestamps, even copies of the fake emails he had sent. HR started by outlining the accusations neutrally, then slid the first document across the table. Mark's smile faltered, just slightly. When they began presenting the sequence of events, the badge scans showing him logged in from my account, the server logs tracing the email manipulations, the proof of deleted files, his composure started to crack. I watched quietly as the web of his sabotage became undeniable. He tried to argue, claiming coincidences or misinterpretations, but the evidence was overwhelming. HR pressed further, and for the first time, I saw real panic in his eyes. By the end, Mark slumped in his chair, realizing that every attempt to undermine me had been recorded, traced, and now exposed. The promotion I had been fighting for was no longer just a possibility, it was a victory waiting to be finalized. Yet, even with Mark cornered, the next steps would test my resolve more than anything that had come before. After the confrontation, the office atmosphere changed almost overnight. People whispered less, and instead of suspicious glances, I received quiet nods of acknowledgement. Karen, who had once leaned in with subtle jabs, kept her distance. Even Mark's closest allies avoided eye contact, unsure how to react now that his sabotage had been exposed. HR scheduled follow-up meetings, not just with Mark but with the IT department and my manager. Every altered file, deleted email, and fake message was documented. The company took the breaches seriously. This wasn't just office drama anymore, it was a case of deliberate misconduct. Interestingly, the fallout also revealed other, smaller schemes. Karen had been quietly spreading rumors to boost her own chances at promotion, hoping my apparent instability would help her. With Mark exposed, she became the subject of subtle scrutiny herself, and it was clear management had noticed her games. Meanwhile, I focused on my work, letting results speak for themselves. Projects that were once sabotaged were now moving forward smoothly, and clients noticed the improvement. People started approaching me with questions, collaboration requests, and even advice, something I hadn't experienced while being constantly undermined. For the first time in months, I felt in control. But the last twist, the final move in this saga, was still waiting just around the corner. A week later, the HR investigation concluded. Every manipulated file, every fabricated email, and every stolen login was thoroughly documented. The evidence was irrefutable. Mark had orchestrated the entire campaign to discredit me, hoping to snatch the promotion for himself. The official report was delivered to our director and senior management. Mark faced formal disciplinary action, suspension pending review, and his reputation within the company plummeted. Even colleagues who had doubted me realized the full extent of his deception. But what surprised me most was the ripple effect. Karen's rumors, once damaging, were now scrutinized. Management reminded everyone that trust and integrity were core values of the company, and any attempts to undermine coworkers would be taken seriously. My name was cleared completely, not just by HR but by the perception of the team itself. It was a relief, but also a lesson. The office could be treacherous, and advancement sometimes required more than skill and dedication. It demanded vigilance, patience, and the ability to navigate deception without losing composure. I finally understood who was truly wrong, who had tried to destroy careers, and how fragile reputation could be in the wrong hands. Yet, the promotion I had been fighting for still hung in the balance, dependent on the final judgment from upper management. And then came the move I hadn't expected. Management convened a final review meeting to decide on the promotion. I walked in feeling a mix of anticipation and calm, carrying only my notes and a renewed confidence. Mark was absent. His suspension had been enforced immediately after the HR report. Karen sat quietly, clearly aware that her subtle schemes were no longer helping her case. During the meeting, my director praised the way I had handled the crisis. "Instead of letting setbacks derail you," he said, "you documented everything, maintained professionalism, and kept the team on track." Every word reinforced what I had felt for weeks: perseverance and integrity mattered more than shortcuts or deceit. I could see the dynamic shift in the room. Colleagues who had whispered and doubted now nodded in approval. Even Karen avoided eye contact, silently realizing her influence had evaporated. By the end of the session, the promotion decision was clear. I would not just get the senior manager position, I would also gain the trust and respect of the team, something money or title alone could never buy. It was a turning point. What had started as a campaign to ruin me had instead showcased my resilience, patience, and strategic thinking. And it was about to teach Mark and Karen a lesson in consequences they wouldn't forget. But even with victory within reach, one final lesson about karma and office politics was waiting to land. A few weeks after officially stepping into my new role as senior manager, the consequences of everyone's actions became undeniable. Mark's suspension turned into a permanent demotion. He was reassigned to a department with little influence and no client-facing responsibilities. His reputation outside the company caught up too. Word of his misconduct spread quietly through professional circles. Karen, who had once seemed untouchable, found herself excluded from major projects. Management made it clear that integrity mattered more than ambition alone, and she struggled to regain the trust she had undermined. Subtle whispers and office politics that had once worked in her favor now worked against her. Meanwhile, I focused on leading my team with fairness and transparency. Projects moved faster, morale improved, and clients noticed the difference. What had once been a daily struggle to prove myself turned into an opportunity to demonstrate real leadership. It was satisfying to see the natural consequences of dishonesty play out so visibly. It wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. Every file deleted, every rumor spread, and every lie told had led back to the person who initiated it. And as I walked past Mark's empty cubicle, I realized the office had changed. People now respected both my work and my integrity. The lesson was clear: shortcuts and deception might seem effective in the moment, but honesty, strategy, and persistence always win in the long run. The final step, the ultimate lesson, was about to become crystal clear. Looking back, the entire ordeal taught me more than any project ever could. I realized that ambition alone isn't enough. Resilience, patience, and the ability to navigate deception are just as crucial. The office had been a minefield of hidden agendas, but facing it head-on and keeping meticulous records allowed me to turn the tables. Mark faced the consequences of his actions, and Karen learned that shortcuts and rumors can backfire. Meanwhile, my reputation, and my promotion, were intact. But more than the title or salary increase, I gained something far more valuable: respect. Respect from my team, from leadership, and from myself for having navigated the storm without compromising my principles. The experience left me wiser. I now approach every challenge with vigilance and strategy, knowing that integrity paired with preparation is the ultimate career armor. And perhaps the most satisfying part of all was seeing that karma has a way of balancing itself. Those who try to sabotage others often end up sabotaging themselves. If there's one takeaway, it's this: always document, always verify, and always trust your instincts. The people who play dirty may seem to get ahead, but in the end, honesty, patience, and perseverance always win. Speech bubble emoji. Have you ever faced a similar challenge at work? Share your story in the comments.